Okay.
We, the tender organs, know that access is not distributed. There is a hierarchy of access that privileges able bodies. When the disabled body enters this able landscape, we are forced to advocate for our own inclusion. We are seen as narcissists when we advocate for our own inclusion, whether in the medical, industrial complex, academia, or the grocery store. Each day is an obstacle course, buildings with stairs and petty stairs, sensory overloads, and the constant pressure to get ourselves fixed by a medical industrial complex that seeks to erase us from existence. When we do ask for our own inclusion and advocate for ourselves, we are called whiny, needy, troublemakers. We tender organs are placed in special needs categories and told that we should just be happy to be included at all. The stereotype of the narcissistic disabled person is an able-bodied tool of exclusion. This is version 2. A more sinister masking of violence could not be imagined. Narcissism is a form of violent hyper-individualization imposed on victims by physical bodies and other groups. People with disabilities are automatically assumed to be narcissistic, reveals that they are being victimized. Its perception of their individuality is itself a form of violence. The disability of individuals is always represented as their own personal misfortune. The narcissism of people with disabilities is a political formation and inhibits their ability to act politically. Political action based on the individualization of disability. The association between narcissism and disability makes it almost impossible to view people with disabilities as anything other than different. Physical and mental disability are more difficult to overcome than prejudices against race and sex. People less likely to identify with a blind person because the perception of the individual with a disability is antithetical to the formation of political identity. Individuality itself is disabled for political use in the case of people with disabilities. People with disabilities need to form political coalitions. Individualization victimizes people with disabilities because it unravels the accusation of narcissism. Individuality will transform from a principle enabling political action into an impediment. And we, the tender organs, cannot defend the legalization of organ sales in the United States because there will be no access to those organs for our bodies. The resolution is constructed out of reach of disabled bodies. No regulations exist on the initial evaluation phase of receiving an organ transplant, making doctors decide of who lives and dies. This creates an insider trading market of healthy bodies. The heroic donor who willingly sacrifices so that someone else could be spared. The valiant donor who struggled courageously against their illness and are triumphantly at the top of the donor list, and the doctors stand as gatekeepers for it all. This is Somerville, 96. Cold logic dictates that some simply will not make it onto the list. It's not just downs we're discriminated against, it's anybody with any disability. We take when faced with the choice the person who is the most whole. The doctor's apparent indifference to her seems all the more inexcusable for this and is reinforced by an example. One doctor was forced by anti-discrimination legislation to assess a patient with Down syndrome said that her explanation that she wanted to live was not good enough. And we, the tender organs, from the moment of our disability, whether at birth or later on, our bodies are presumed dead. Once the evidence of our impending decomposition is made apparent, we are no longer allowed to be saved. Our disability makes our deaths that much more obvious because we can no longer live a full life. Allowing us to participate in the organ transplant process would be a waste of an organ. Impairment is used as a benchmark to restrict access to life-saving medical procedures. This is Belkin and 12. There are rules, unemotional, clinical, detached rules for a situation that is none of those things. She's being denied a donor transplant because she has a cascading syndrome that will shorten and limit her life, meaning that kidney will not save her in the way that my donor starts out healthier. Everything it takes to undergo a transplant are difficult, sometimes impossible for the child who is less impaired. We, the tender organs of the world, is built for able-bodied without recognition that able-bodiedness is a temporary circumstance. We must always navigate an able-bodied world by advocating for our own inclusion. We are seen as invaders to the able-bodied world. Invaders can be cast out or put down. This is Campbell and 8. These psychic life empowerment situations can be healer turning the subject against itself that takes place in acts of self-reproach, conscious, and melancholy that work in tandem with processes of social regulation. The consequences of taking to oneself negative subjectivities regulate and continually form identity. The history of having been called an injurious name is embodied. Words enter the limbs, craft the gesture, bend the spine. These slurs accumulate over time, stimulating their history, taking on the semblance of the natural, configuring and restricting the doxa that counts as reality. It is psychically untenable because it is posited on top of Cartesian dualism that separates beingness from embodiment. This kind of reasoning disregards the dynamics of subjectivity formation. In other words, disability is me, that me, not need to be left with negative ontology of subjectivity. Purdy's bodily detachment appears locked into it with this with internalized ableism. By unwittingly performing ableism, disabled people can complicit in their own demise, reinforcing impairment as an outlaw ontology. And we, the tender organs, still have to advocate for accessibility in this space. Academia only ever accommodates us as where we spend our precious resources to make sure we can even participate. Absent our own advocacy, we wouldn't be allowed to access academia, which always short circuits our ability to have meaningful participation in educational spaces like this one. This is program 10. We typically frame disability as an individual problem response to be reactive rather than proactive. We accommodate disability. Accommodation is a comprehensive response. Maintains the notion that access to disabled individuals' problem to solve. On most college campuses, disabled students spend an inordinate amount of time establishing eligibility and requesting accommodations. Why should disabled students be required to take responsibility for those access issues that are institutional problems? Why should the academic experience for disabled students be so different from their non-disabled peers? And we, the tender organs, demand there be nothing about us without us. That is, we will not be left behind while the able bodies decide what is the best form of accommodation for us. While educational institutions put us in special needs boxes make us feel guilty and ashamed for needing additional help, we cannot allow debate to continue without an interjection of disability thought and consciousness. This is Grayson 14. I'm actually not okay with being left behind because of my body, not okay with any of us being left behind because of our bodies, not in some future state-free, oppression-free existence, and not now. The one thing I, you, we have any much control over is now, so don't leave us out. We, the tender organ, know that debate needs more disability consciousness. The space must be a fluid conversation between educating and educators. A space where we can examine difference, expose stereotypes, and create a critical pedagogy that can remake the social and physical landscapes of the university as Wilson et al. In two. A third space classroom is performative. The performative is not a singular act, but one of the powerful ways in which subjects are called to social being from diffuse social quarters. The social performative is a crucial part not only of subject formation, but the ongoing political contestation and reformulation of the subject. How we might or might not change it, why, and to what ends are all possibilities open to debate. A third space classroom is a political contestation and a remaking of subjectivity. We encourage students to examine the rhetorical constructions of difference and dominant cultural narratives. We pose questions that turn our critical lens back on us and our projects. Challenging students to think about the boundaries among academic disciplines, community, and discursive spaces. We believe that by incorporating disability issues into the curriculum as widely as possible, by engaging disability studies theory, by rethinking disciplinary knowledge as a result of this encounter, teachers and students, disabled and non-disabled, can participate in remaking the social and physical landscapes of the university. And we, the tender organs, know that you will someday join us. Able-bodiedness is only a temporary state of being. We are all in a state of decomposition. Human life must be interdependent for the survival of all of us. This is Steve version 2. Let it be recognized that physical barriers are psychic barriers as well. That people with disabilities travel in groups composed mostly of the able-bodied. When we come to a barrier, we realize that our perception does not conform, although they rarely have this realization. This difference in perceptions is social barrier equal to or greater than any physical barrier. Narcissism is profoundly incompatible with the reality of disability because we, the tender organs, have to rely so often on other people. People who rely on caregivers have to be diplomats. They, in the form of identity politics, unlike any other, we need a community to support us. Some of you have disabilities, some of you do not. Most of you will someday. That's the reality of the human mind and body. Remember what you already know about people with disabilities, so the knowledge will be useful when you join us. The blind do not lead the blind. The lame do not want to walk alone. We do not love only our own kind or ourselves. You others are our caregivers, and we can be yours. You let us.
Okay, so just to clarify this, the app is not the same as it's listed as the one on the wiki, right? There are different tags, right? There's no mention of the ballot as a referendum on who lives or dies, right?
You are right. We did take that particular tag out because it became a debate that we were not comfortable being in.
Fair. But you also take out the one about political citizenship, right?
Yes, we took out the one about political citizenship and receivers.
In the tag, but the one is still...
I want us to keep that in mind for the rest of kind of the questions that happen. What is the goal of the app?
That should be contextualized to the piece of Wilson evidence where we're talking about the app being a method of creating a third space classroom.
Okay, so it's about changing what occurs in classrooms then, right? And inserting disability consciousness into these things?
About like remaking the social and physical landscapes of the university. Yes.
Okay, how do you remake the social and, or I suppose, how do you remake the physical landscapes of these things?
The Wilson evidence indicates that by by doing things like the affirmative, which is an engagement with disability studies theory in the classroom, it allows for that remaking of subjectivity within the university, which can spill over to reshaping the physical aspects of the
Okay,
university,
so
i.e.
it's,
inaccessible
kind
piece
of-
of it.
Okay, what is access?
That is different for different people. I know for people like Sarah Beth and myself, access has to do with the speed and asking people to pass around when she has a seizure and things like that. But like we won't prescribe what access is for every possible individual.
Okay, but I mean, the one I see talks a lot about, like the Kroger and 10 evidence, for example. It says that it is about accommodation versus access. It still
Yes.
seems to have, what is the context of which Kroger is saying access then?
I would contend that Kroger is describing access in the same way that we are describing access.
Okay, so now let's talk about your Campbell evidence. It says that kind of embracing disability as a negative outlaw or as an outlaw status is internalized ableism, right?
Well, it says by unwittingly performing internalized ableism, i.e. because of the scripts of narcissism that gets coded onto people with disabilities, disability gets coded as an outlaw ontology.
Okay, and so the one I see at the end also talks about how, you kind of love everyone. I'm trying to find that line again. What was the discussion of love that happened there? Whether appreciation.
The line is, we do not love only our own kind or ourselves. That's a specific line from the
Okay,
CSUF.
so I mean, who does the one you see love?
Well, I would probably describe the one you see as a process of self-love in order to actually,
I mean, but you
better
don't just
actualize
love yourself,
politics
right?
overall.
That's what the card says, so who else do you love?
We love everyone.